Hunters are green, the colour of the wood where they hunt. And hunters are very butch and masculine and attractive things, rugged men. Millers are not. They probably eat too many cakes. But he rages. He notices that this girl perhaps doesn't have eyes for him. She has eyes for this hunter that keeps hanging around. And he doesn't like this hunter, and he doesn't like the hunter's colour of green. And he positively tries to chase him out of the room. And to chase him out of the room, what better way to set up a musical chase than imitative counterpoint? So, this rhythm digs into his brain, and that very tune is built around the same sixth. In fact, his voice part rises from a C to an E flat to a G through the same triad. The whole song, this minute and a half, is built up of that one motif. And the 14th song, that was Der Jäger, runs straight into the 15th, Eifersucht und Stolz. At this point, the boy's mind is raging with all of these different emotions: jealousy, pride. He's furious, he doesn't know what to think, and he rushes out to the brook. And the brook, there's too much genius in this song. The brook represents his raging. And every moment in real time of his thoughts are represented and mirrored by the brook. There are too many details, too many gasps, little rests in the boy's voice to represent. And here, the thought process is followed further into perhaps the most amazing song in the cycle, the 16th, Die liebe Farbe. The compositional restrictions Schubert sets himself here are extraordinary. The entire song, every 16th note of this song, contains the note F sharp. It sounds over 500 times in the course of the song, and it's strophic, set to 3 verses. That's a huge restriction. And in any composer that wasn't Schubert or Mozart, this would result in really dull music. There's nothing to do when you have to play an F sharp every note. But this is a symbol for Schubert, and this is where technique and emotion come together, of his fixation and his obsession. And at this point, the miller has honed in on one thing and one thing only, and that is the colour green, which represents also the hunter and hunter's horn, and also perhaps a death knell. And this hunter's horn, this death knell, this fixation digs into his brain for the entirety of the song. Now, whereas Liebe Farbe is a study of obsession, Die böse Farbe is a study of fragmentation and contrasts. There is hardly a bar in Die böse Farbe where there is not a texture change, or a dynamic change, or a contrast of motion, or melody, or lyricism to declamation. Every bar is different. And we can see his mental process starting to break down, to fragment, as he almost loses his mind, he loses his sanity. Now, in the 18th song, Trockene Blumen, he's exhausted. And we've come full circle in terms of keys. We've gone from B flat major to E minor. A tritone away from where he began. Essentially, we've gone from life to death. And death starts to obsess him. And this death march, as he stares at these dry, wilted flowers on this table, lacking in energy, plodding towards perhaps his only doom. And then he has an idea, he has a death fantasy, as suicidal people do. And the music moves into the key of resurrection, not death, the key of E major, and E minor, E major. And he imagines her walking on his grave, above his grave, and that same figure, you might recognize, is the same sixth that has viewed the entire cycle. The 19th song is a heartbreaking dialogue between the brook, which has now been given voice. Essentially, the boy is meeting the brook in death and is giving voice to the brook. Perhaps he's losing his mind, and nature really is speaking to him. But we're back in our home key of G, but in the minor. And he sets up all of these metaphors, how when one dies in love, nothing remains of life. Nature is cold to him. Everything is green, everything is hateful. And like we do with depressed people, the brook sings back to him, but don't you see how beautiful it is? It takes the same metaphors of angels and lilies and flowers and says, they're so wonderful. And it sings to him in the major, but he's having none of it. He's beyond that. He says, you don't know what love does, that chord. And he sings back in the minor. And he sings only 2 stanzas. He runs out of words, and he moves into the major as he finds his final piece and becomes one with the book. And he asks the book to sing on. And it sings using the same 1, 3, 5, 6. The same arpeggios. And with the final turn of the mill wheel, the boy sinks to the bottom of the book. It's an extraordinary thing. Now, if he'd stopped the cycle there, it would have been, apart from anything else, horribly depressing. But this is what separates this cycle from Winterreise to me. Winterreise is undeniably great, but it's at the end of Schubert's life, and Schubert's life was difficult, and it's almost too much for me. I can listen to an individual song, Wirtshaus, 16 times, but the whole cycle, it's too depressing, there's no hope. But schöne Müllerin is extraordinary because we are given this vision into the mental process that occurs when someone goes through depression towards suicide. But we can see the outside world trying to convince this boy that the world still is beautiful. And even though the boy is suffering these awful pains, the music that he sings is some of the most beautiful music ever written. So Schubert's message is one of hope. It's that life is beautiful, and even our pains and our trials and our tribulations, even if we can't surmount them, are beautiful. It's an incredible gesture. None of this nonsense, this pessimistic nonsense with Schopenhauer telling us that, there's no hope in life. It's a message of much more hope than that. It's an extraordinary piece. So hopefully, if you didn't understand a word of that, you've got some level of how fascinated I am. The 6ths mount up at the end. It lulls back and forth this lullaby between the 6th degree of the scale and the 5th, between the major and minor 6th, with the major eventually winning out, and der Vollmond steigt, der Nebel weicht, und der Himmel da oben, wie ist der so weit? The full moon rises, the mists recede, and the heavens above, and on the word above he sings his 6th. How wide and infinitely beautiful they are. So if you'll give me a couple of minutes, we'll present this beautiful cycle to you, and I hope you enjoy it.